International Women's Day 2021. Redefining Women's Empowerment in Arts and Culture by Karen Colville, Canadian artist-designer. I have been working on this tapestry, a lot of my work, and the materials inside of it. It's not finished yet. I still have work to do, but a component is using natural fibers, and this is really important. This is made out of industrial hemp, and this is the industrial hemp that was processed on a hand spinning wheel and hand dyed with natural dyes. So I'm still working on this, and essentially I dedicate this contemporary tapestry to Princess Latifa and Princess Shamsa of the UAE in equality, diversity, and sustainable development. A fabric, societal function in the present day. I join a long line of women who have turned the history of domestic arts into political expression and gives an international voice to women, resilience, and redefining our roles in the fabric of society, women of the world. What is love, tough love, and what is abuse in every individual case? The treatment of women in the past, physically, emotionally, spiritual, and financial. The infrastructure is built. Now it's time for human rights to become a reality. Privileges for some and not for others, as basic human rights must be with better standards. I fulfilled my dream to visit the UAE, to see mosaics, Islamic art, and a newly built society. And since I was a little girl, to see the desert flourish and environmental changes as going on in Masdar and the Solar City in the memory of Zayed. I felt at the time, here's an opportunity to work with people of an ancient culture of the Bedouins and to see present-day economic development. In developing countries where global investment is sought, human rights seem to be the last on the list of accomplishment. I want to express myself with my freedom of speech, even if I only reach a few people, but on the importance of human rights throughout history and into the future. I'm not in the position to criticize any government, but I do know the difference between right and wrong. I am a visual artist, designer, and globalization is proving to be very complex. The UAE was the first country for myself as an emerging artist to be able to show my artwork to an international audience. There were people there from the UK, Germany, from all over the world. Iran. I've met people from all over the world, and to experience people of different backgrounds and faith. Women are to have the foundations to have a career, be in better positions of power, and raise a family that they choose to do so. But any society who considers themselves as global to attract investment must consider human rights within their laws, with just laws that are fair to expats and to their own people. Changes to laws of human rights, international law, are gradual. Globalization is most often used in economic contexts, but it also is affected by politics and culture. In general, globalization has been shown to increase the standard of living in developing countries, but some analysts warn that globalization can have a negative effect on local and emerging economies and individual workers, small business, and when real estate investments go wrong. Here our charter is under challenges: our sovereignty, our freedom of religion, because global authoritarian measures, while elites are the few that benefit from their investments. The kinds of measures are a step backwards instead of moving forward into the future. I first learned of the history of the Bedouin women needleworkers when I visited the UAE on the embroidery at the embroidery exhibit. Islamic embroidery in the nomadic and urban tradition dating from the 17th to the 20th century that illuminate how the magnificent tradition of embroidery carried on by urban, rural, and nomadic women sustained regional, tribal, and family identities through its integration in communal activities, and how it evolved through the encounter of different cultures. With Arts and Culture Abu Dhabi, I was a delegate at the French Embassy in Abu Dhabi representing Canadian arts and culture in a 40-year bilateral relationship, and I take this serious. I also met the UAE Minister of the Environment while visiting our sustainable community gardens in Vancouver, Canada, on the subject of arts and the environment in 2017. As a Canadian artist, in an evolving global society, instead we're slipping off the edge with globalization, with power and control without respecting human lives and human rights. Women and girls around the world are still married as children and trafficked. This is a very serious subject that is still ongoing. And yes, I've made these notes and I've kind of lost my place here. And I'm not making a speech, but at the same time, I'm really expressing my points to be able to get my points across. And yes, so essentially, women and girls are still being married or trafficked into slavery around the world, and their marriages arranged to the status of families are refused access and political participation. Women's full and effective participation and decision-making, as well as the elimination of violence for achieving a gender equality and empowerment, and wanting to live a life of independence. Trauma-based mind control used by the military and the military-industrial complex and intelligence agencies, mind control with abuse, being drugged against one's will, caging because a young girl dreamed of what it was like to be independent and acted on it. This happens worldwide where governments do not respect human rights. Amnesty International in November, reports on the UAE revealed a major overhaul of its penal and civil codes, which it says it would modernize a number of elements tied to family and personal law, and these are welcome steps. However, Amnesty International's review of the texts of the law available found that these do not apply to Emirati women, creating a two-tier system of the treatment of women. So Princess Latifa recently reported that she's been held hostage by her family at an undisclosed location for almost 3 years now. Dubai and the UAE must immediately ensure she is released and respect her freedom of movement, being deprived of air, being able to see outside. That punishment has continued for years. Human Rights report that the UAE of enforced disappearances, arbitrary detention, so these are very, very serious subjects that are being dealt with and investigated by a number of agencies on a global scale, because it's come to this. And so yes, and I just want to go back to where I was lost and apologize for this. So the enforced disappearances, torture, and ill treatment of domestic dissidents, as well as the male legal guardians of women that allow families to deprive women, that their actions are consistent with abusive relationships, such as denying them the right to marry, whom they want to marry, work or study, or other restrictions of movement may be considered within the start of broader reforms to dismantle the deeply entrenched discrimination that the women in the UAE prevents them from exercising basic human freedoms and rights. In Canada, many of these relate to Indigenous people, including violations of their right to safe drinking water, violence against Indigenous women and girls, and violations of the right to food in these communities as a result to failure to mitigate the impact of climate change. The governments so this is difficult because I have this in a computer and I wish I had just been able to copy it to a piece of paper and read it off, as most people do. So so a lot of these issues are going on here in Canada, which is to be considered a free country and a first world country, but it's no longer the case. So the Trudeau government also failed to take meaningful steps to repatriate dozens of Canadians, most who are children, unlawfully detained in life-threatening conditions in prisons and camps. So suspects in that this COVID-19 crisis on half of humanity, women, and ethnicity, textiles are inextricably linked to our lives, essential to our survival, and powerful signifiers of our existence, nationalities, ages, sexualities, abilities, identities, and statuses. Culture and arts is a powerful means to foster women's rights. So I do not take any of this lightly. And even getting this out, because these are very challenging, difficult subjects that need to be addressed in the immediate sense. They need to be taken care of. Because how can a society flourish when a woman is living in a constant state of fear, or a man even in that case, and constantly looking over their shoulder, or in fear they might think or say or do the inappropriate or wrong thing, and then face severe punishments and consequences for doing so. So my art is a very important premise to be able to express myself culturally and politically here in Canada, but also on having an international voice. I thank you for taking the time to be able to listen to my concerns and the facts that I have gathered in my research. And yes, I do enjoy making more presentations and art talks, and looking forward to your support now and for my patrons and supporters in the future. Thank you very much. Thank you kindly.